Game day is almost here, folks. The first real big game in Kinnick Stadium. It's been a pretty quiet home slate for the Hawkeyes. First Big Ten game at home, and the other two games were against UMass and Albany. We'll talk about Iowa, Indiana, my score prediction for the big showdown against the top 15 Hoosiers in just a minute. But first, a thank you to Iowa Floor Covering. We've been plugging them. They got a new phone number. If you need information on flooring, if you want to know what direction your project should be in, needs to take, whatever the case may be sure you call Tyler down at Iowa Floor Covering. They'll get you set up with the right products and the right services. 515-207-0228. That's 515-207-0228. You can also visit them online, iowafloorcovering.com. Iowa Floor Covering in Bondurant. So we're talking about Iowa, Indiana. We've been talking all week. I published a preview earlier in the week. If you missed our live show with Coach Don Patterson, we talked extensively about this game on Wednesday night. You can listen or watch that show back. It's also posted on your favorite podcast platforms. And folks, by the way, a reminder, if you listen to our podcast on Spotify, Apple, on Amazon, be sure you give us a 5-star review and be sure you're following our show on those platforms as well. But I've been teasing this all week. I seem like I'm the only guy out there saying this. I understand I'm going to get criticized by some people. It seems like all the national people are heaping praise on Indiana. Certainly the Indiana fan base and media base, they have all taken the bait hook, line, and sinker. Not saying that they're going to get caught. All right, that's not my implication. But the bottom line is there's a lot of hype around this program. And rightfully so. They did beat Illinois by 50-plus points last week in Bloomington. Now, that's a key. I'm not going to reiterate everything I talked about earlier this week on my preview, but this is Indiana's first road game of the season. And by the way, I went back and looked at Indiana's games on the road last year. They really didn't play anybody on the road last year besides Ohio State and Notre Dame. Now, Ohio State and Notre Dame, both really good teams, both college football playoff teams, but it's hard to sort of gauge what this team will be like on the road. And they've got a different personnel base, right? Their quarterback's different. But Indiana didn't really play anybody last year on the road. To give you some perspective, their road games last year were at UCLA, at Northwestern, at Michigan State. So I'm looking specifically at Indiana's offense because that seems to be, everybody's talking about how complete of a team this is, but can Iowa deal with that Indiana offense, especially with the struggles Iowa had in the first quarter against 8th and Cali McManus in Piscataway against the Rutgers Scarlet Knights? You look at Indiana's rankings nationally, they are second in the country right now in total offense, 27th in the country in pass offense, third in the country in rush offense. And they're, I believe, one of two teams that are non-military schools that are 300-plus yards per game on the ground. I believe it's them and the Florida State Seminoles. So those numbers are incredibly impressive. Their scoring offense ranks 5th nationally. So all tremendous numbers. And while we're at it, might as well give you the defensive numbers. Indiana ranks 3rd in the country in total defense, 8th in the country in pass defense, 20th in the country in rush defense. That might be the one category that Iowa, at least from a numbers standpoint, is better in. Rush defense. Iowa's 7th in the country in rush defense to this point, but neither team has played a difficult schedule. All right. Contrary to what some people may try to convince you of, neither team has played a difficult schedule. Iowa's played a more difficult schedule because they played 2 games on the road, one of which was against a top 15 Cyclones team, the other being against an improved Rutgers team. Yes, Indiana played a top 10 Illinois team. Illinois has no business being in the top 10, but it's still too early because they hadn't played anybody either. All right, rant over. Iowa's going to have to figure out a way to stay ahead of the chains, right? And we're going to publish a cut from our live show with Coach Patterson. We'll publish that cut tomorrow on Friday, talking about some keys Coach had for Iowa to be competitive and win this game in Kinnick. One of those keys for Coach Patterson did involve Iowa's ability to stay ahead of the change. But the other key relates to Iowa's defense against that Indiana offense, all right? The bottom line is Indiana's efficient in every category. They haven't had to do as much through the year. When you have massive leads, it makes sense that you can sit on the ball, run the ball. Last week against Indiana's one really good opponent, or at least a team that we expected to be pretty darn good in Illinois, we didn't see them go over the top a lot. They're more of a mid-range passing team. So I don't think they share that similarity with Rutgers as far as these elite receivers. They got good receivers on the outside, don't get me wrong. But we just don't have the evidence yet of Indiana taking the top off of defenses of an Iowa caliber, and Illinois would be the only example. Had they done that last week, we would have seen it. They had 2 plays of 30-plus yards through the air, but one of them was on a tight end screen. So my question is, how much man defense does Iowa play? How much are they willing to leave Jalen Watson, Deshaun Lee out on an island? We saw that did not pay off much for Iowa last week. Phil Parker made adjustments. He had an extra day to prep because they had a Friday game last week. I also think the Kinnick crowd is going to be huge. If Iowa can control the field, we saw what it did in 2021 to Penn State. We had a backup quarterback in the game for Sean Clifford. You get him down in that north end zone. It's hard to get out of that north end zone. So field position will be a big storyline as well. But my optimism surrounding this game is, A, Iowa's at home. All right. B, I just think people are over-regarding that win last week against Illinois as a very fine win, but it's one game. The fact of the matter is Illinois was down 6 of their top 7 DBs. Doesn't mean Indiana's not really good. I'm going to keep saying that over and over again because I know when I say things like this, it upsets people on the other side of the aisle. Not trying to do that. I'm just acknowledging that we've got one game of real sample size. The other games, I don't care. I don't care about Old Dominion. Don't care about Indiana State. Don't care about who are they playing, like Missouri State, someone else that doesn't matter. Don't care about those games. Just like I don't care about Iowa's performances against UMass and Albany. It doesn't matter. What I do know is since Cignetti got to Indiana, they have not won a road game against a good opponent. Again, last year, their best wins on the road were UCLA, Northwestern, Michigan State. They lost, only scored 15 against Ohio State on the road, only scored 17 at Notre Dame in the playoff. And oh, by the way, 7 of those points came in garbage time. This is a slightly different offense, different quarterback. Let's give him some flowers. Fernando Mendoza was really good on the road last year at Cal. So I'm not saying he's going to be shook by the Kinnick environment, but there is something special about Kinnick Stadium. The fans are right on top of you. If you're an Indiana fan, you're traveling to the game, you'll experience it. It is different than, and I've not been to every venue in the Big Ten, but based on what I've been told, it's different than any venue in the Big Ten, and it is something special to experience. Don Patterson's other key, and again, you'll be able to watch that segment tomorrow, but his other key had to do with Iowa's ability to stay ahead of the chains offensively. And I don't know where Iowa attacks this other than you've got to establish the run early. And that's music to the ears of Kirk Ferentz, right? It's out of his comfort zone to come out attacking. Now, we've seen Iowa do that these last 2 weeks, given the matchup, but I think you're going to see Iowa come out early and run the ball. I'd be very surprised if they go pass happy early. I believe they threw on 2 of their first 3 offensive plays last week against Rutgers. But if there's one even slight weakness statistically for Indiana, they're 20th in the country in rush defense. Still excellent, but not as good as their pass defense, their defense in total. So if Iowa can run the ball, if it's got this unbelievable offensive line that Pro Football Focus wants us to believe it has, then they'll come out, they'll try to establish that run, which will keep them ahead of the chains and will make it easier for Gronowski to operate in short to mid-range down situations. And hopefully that'll open up the passing game. Sounds pretty prototypical Iowa, right? Hopefully there's some wrinkles in there. They're going to need some wrinkles to win this game. But the bottom line is if Iowa can stay ahead of the chains with the run game, it will help. And obviously then on the flip side, you want to get them behind on the chains. Iowa's rush defense has to be solid because you don't want Mendoza to be able to be comfortable. Indiana had 7 sacks against Altmaier and that Illinois offense last week. Again, goes back to staying ahead of the chains. All 7 of those sacks came when Illinois was behind the chains. Here's one other stat, not directly related to Indiana, that I want to bring up. Everybody wants to talk about the last 10 top 25 opponents that Iowa has lost to. They've lost to 10 straight top 25 opponents going back several years. But here's an interesting stat, and Coach Don Patterson, credit him with this stat. He shared this with me earlier today. Did you know 6 of those top 25 teams, 6 of those 10 top 25 teams, 6 of them were top 7 nationally at the time Iowa played them? In addition, you want to guess how many of those games out of those 10 top 25 matchups, how many of those opponents came to Kinnick? The answer, 1. 2022, Iowa loses to Michigan, 27-14. That's it. All the other games, all 9 of those top 25 losses were away from Kinnick, either in the Big Ten championship game, in a bowl game, or in true road games. So, I mean, look, the streak is what it is. I know Kirk Ferentz is tired of the streak. Iowa wants to get the monkey off its back. It's not affecting Indiana directly, but the data about Kinnick Stadium and Iowa and Phil Parker and Kirk Ferentz and these Iowa teams is that it's very hard to score points on them in Kinnick. I just went back and looked. Did you know the last time Iowa gave up 24 points or more in Kinnick was 2022? That loss to Michigan. That was the last time. It's been 3 years since Iowa gave up 24 points in Kinnick. Now, they have not had the best home slate. That's a fact. But hopefully you'll get where I'm coming from with this prediction. The line has moved in Indiana's favor, right? I think it opened at like 3.5, 4, 5, somewhere in there. Again, I'm not a betting guy, never will be. But that's where the line has been. Now it's up to like 7 or 8, maybe 8.5 as we speak here Thursday evening. But here's my prediction, folks. I've been talking about it all week long. I think a lot of the people in the media, I'm not saying that everybody that's picking Indiana big is feeding the beast, but I do think there's maybe a small faction of people, maybe in the national media, maybe in some other segments of media, cliques and bubbles. I think there's some people that might be kind of feeding the beast, so to speak, gushing over this Indiana team because these Indiana Hoosier fans, they're passionate. They're excited. And the more you talk about how great they are and how dominant they are, the more clicks you're going to get from that fan base. Iowa fans, they're pretty steady because Iowa's been pretty steady. They've been really steady at home. And that goes into my prediction. I've got a final of Iowa 27, Indiana 24. Indiana scores 24 points in Kinnick. Will be the first time a team has scored 24 in Kinnick since, again, 2022. But it will not be enough. I think Iowa covers the number easily. I think they win it straight up and shock a lot of people who I believe have overreacted to a week early schedule for Indiana. It's a good Indiana team. It will be a dogfight. Will I be shocked if Iowa loses? No. But I also have a lot of faith in Iowa here. This is not just going out on a limb. There's a lot of data we just talked about that supports the idea that Iowa can get this done on Saturday in Kinnick Stadium in Iowa City. We'll be live with you folks following the game. Myself and Coach Don Patterson. Tune in for Iowa postgame with Coach Don Patterson following the 2:30 p.m. Central Time kick. The game will be televised on Peacock, and we'll be live all evening right here from the Hawkeye of the Storm. Enjoy the game.